Good evening, one and all. We welcome you all to the international webinar series on holistic health, well-being, and sustainable development 2025, commemorating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, nation celebrating 78 years of independence, and United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2015 to 2030 as part of awareness and campaigns in collaboration with Sri Holistic Health Foundation India and Sri Research Institute Center for Art, Sciences and Wellbeing. Before we start our sessions, let's take the blessings of Almighty.
कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः.
With the blessings of Almighty, we shall continue with today's commemorations. Today, we are commemorating International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances on 30th August every year. More than a human rights violation against an individual, enforced disappearances has frequently been used as a strategy to spread terror within the society. The feeling of insecurity generated by the practice is not limited to the close relatives of the disappeared, but also affects their communities and society as a whole. Enforced disappearance has become a global problem and is not restricted to a specific region of the world. Once largely the product of military dictatorships, enforced disappearances can nowadays be perpetrated in complex situations of internal conflict, especially as a means of political repression of opponents of particular concern, or the ongoing harassment of human rights defenders, relatives of victims, witness, and legal counsel dealing with cases of enforced disappearance, the use by states of counter-terrorist activities as an excuse for breaching their obligations, and still widespread impunity for enforced disappearance. Special attention must be paid to specific groups of especially vulnerable people like children and people with disabilities. Hundreds of thousands of people have vanished during the conflicts or periods of repression in at least 85 countries around the world. So who is affected? The victims themselves. The victims are frequently tortured and in constant fear for their lives. They are well aware that their families do not know what has become of them, and that the chances are slim and that anyone will be to their aid, having been removed from the protective precinct of the law and disappeared from society. They are in fact deprived of all rights and are at the mercy of their captors. Even if death is not the final outcome, the victim is eventually released from the nightmare. The physical and psychological scars of this form of dehumanization and brutality and torture, which often accompany it, remain. So friends and families of the victims are also affected. The families and friends of the victims experience low mental anguish, not knowing whether the victim is still alive, and so if he or she is being held, under what conditions, and in what state of health. So they alternate between hope and despair, wondering and waiting sometimes for years, for news that may never come. In addition, they are well aware that they too are threatened and that they may suffer the same fate themselves, and that searching for the truth may expose them to even greater danger. The family distress is frequently compounded by the maternal consequences of the disappearance. The disappeared person is often the family's main breadwinner. So he or she may be the only member of the family able to cultivate the crops or run the family business. The emotional appeal is thus exacerbated by material deprivation, made more acute by costs incurred should they decide to undertake a search. Furthermore, they do not know when, if ever, their loved one is going to return, which makes it difficult for them to adapt to the new situation. In some cases, national legislation may make it impossible to draw a pension or receive other means of support in the absence of a death certificate. Economic and social marginalization is frequently the result. The serious economic hardships which usually accompany a disappearance are most often borne by women, and it is the women who are most often at the forefront of the struggle to resolve the disappearance of family members. In this capacity, they may suffer intimidation, persecution, and reprisals when women are themselves direct victims of disappearances. They become particularly vulnerable to sexual and other forms of violence. Children can also be victims, both directly and indirectly. The disappearance of a child is a clear contravention of a number of provisions of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, including the right to a personal identity. The loss of a parent through disappearance is also a serious violation of a child's human rights. Communities are also affected. Communities are directly affected by the disappearance of breadwinners and the degradation of the family's economic situation and their social marginalization. Enforced disappearance has frequently been used as a strategy to spread terror within the society. The feeling of insecurity generated by this practice is not limited to the close relatives of the disappeared, but also affects their communities and society as a whole. So, according to the Declaration on the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances, proclaimed by the General Assembly in its resolution 47 by 133 of 18 December 1992, as a body of principles for all states, and enforced disappearances occurs when persons are arrested, detained, or abducted against their will or otherwise deprived of their liberty by officials of different branches or levels of government, or by organized groups of private individuals acting on behalf of or with the support, direct or indirect consent of acquiescence of the government, followed by a refusal to disclose the fate or whereabouts of the person concerned, or a refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of their liberty which places such person outside the protection of the law. A serious violation of human rights having been removed from the protection present of the law and disappeared from society, victims of enforced disappearances are in fact deprived of all their rights and are at the mercy of their captors. Some of the human rights that enforced disappearances regularly violate are the right of recognition as a person before the law, the right of liberty and security of the person, the right not to be subjected to torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, the right to life when the disappeared person is killed, the right to an identity, the right to a fair trial and to judicial quarantines, the right to an effective remedy, including reparation and compensation, the right to know the truth regarding the circumstance of a disappearance. Enforced disappearance also generally violate various economic, social, and cultural rights for both the victims as well as their families. The right to protection and assistance to the family, the right to an adequate standard of living, the right to health, the right to education. Both the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, which came into force on 1st July 2002, and the International Common for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances, adopted by the UN General Assembly on 20th December 2006, state that when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed at any civilian population, a forced disappearance qualifies as a crime against humanity, and thus it is not a statute of limitation. It gives victims' families the right to seek reparations and to demand the truth about the disappearance of their loved ones. So, when looking at the origins of this day on 21st December 2010, by its resolution 65 by 209, the UN General Assembly expressed deep concern about the increase in enforced involuntary disappearances in various regions of the world, including arrest, detention, and abduction, when these are part of or amount to enforced disappearances, and by the growing number of reports concerning harassment, ill treatment, and intimidation of witness of disappearances or relatives of persons who have disappeared. By the same resolution, the Assembly welcomed the adoption of the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance and decided to declare 30th August the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances to be observed beginning in 2011. So the first World Congress on Enforced Disappearances drew 720 participants from over 120 countries and 1,392 online attendees, mainly family members of the disappeared. The event aimed to foster connections among families and advocate for justice, truth, and prevention of future and disappearance. The Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances accepts cases from any country in the world. It's not necessary to exhaust domestic remedies before submitting a case to the group. The cases of disappearance can be submitted by relatives of disappeared or by organizations acting on their behalf, which can be submitted through email or post, which you can also get further information on how to report a disappearance online. Yesterday, as we missed the commemoration on 29th August, it was International Day Against Nuclear Tests. In 2025, we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the first nuclear test, and we must never forget the legacy of over 2,000 nuclear weapons tests carried out over the last 80 years. Since nuclear weapons testing began on 16 July 1945, over 2,000 have taken place. In the early days of nuclear testing, little consideration was given to its devastating effects on human life, let alone the dangers of nuclear fallout from atmospheric tests. Insight and history have shown us the terrifying and tragic effects of nuclear weapon testing, especially when controlled conditions go awry and in the light of the far more powerful and destructive nuclear weapons that exist today. On 2nd December 2009, the 64th session of the United Nations General Assembly declared 29th August the International Day Against Nuclear Tests by unanimously adopting Resolution 64 by 35. The resolution calls for the increasing awareness and education about the effects of nuclear weapon test explosions or any other nuclear explosions and the need for their cessation as one of the means of achieving the goal of a nuclear weapon-free world. The resolution was initiated by the Republic of Kazakhstan together with a large number of sponsors and co-sponsors with a view to commemorating the closure of the Semipalatinsk nuclear test site on 29th August 1991. So 2010 marked the inaugural commemoration of the International Day Against Nuclear Tests. In each subsequent year, the day has been observed by coordinating various activities throughout the world, such as symposia, conferences, exhibits, competitions, publications, lectures, media broadcasts, and other initiatives. Since its establishment, many bilateral and multilateral governmental deep level developments, as well as broad movements in civil society, have helped to advance the cause of banning nuclear tests. Moreover, convinced that nuclear disarmament and the total elimination of nuclear weapons are the only absolute guarantee against the use of threat of nuclear weapons. The General Assembly designated 26 September as the International Day for the total elimination of nuclear weapons, which is devoted to furthering the objective of the total elimination of nuclear weapons. Through the mobilization of international efforts, the International Day for the elimination of the nuclear weapons was observed for the first time in September 2014. The International Day Against Nuclear Tests, together with other events and actions, has fostered a global environment that strongly advocates for a world free of nuclear weapons. The international instrument to put an end to all forms of nuclear testing in the 1996 Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Theory, CTBT. Unfortunately, this has yet to enter its force. As the Secretary General recognized in his disarmament agenda, Securing Our Common Future, launched on 24th May 2018, the norm against testing is an example of measure that serves both disarmament and non-proliferation objectives by constraining the development of advanced new types of nuclear weapons. The CTBT puts a brake on the arms race. It also serves as a powerful normative banner against potential states that might seek to develop, manufacture, and subsequently acquire nuclear weapons in violation of their non-proliferation commitments. Every effort needs to be made to ensure that entry into force of the CTBT and to preserve its place in international architecture. In this regard, the Secretary General appeals to all remaining states, those whose ratifications are required for the CTBT to enter into force, to commit to sign the treaty as an early date if they have not already done so. So, to accelerate the completion of the ratification process, it is the hope of the UN that one day all nuclear weapons will be eliminated. Until then, there is a need to observe International Day Against Nuclear Tests as the world works towards promoting peace and security. So on 2nd December 2009, the 64th session of the United Nations General Assembly declared 29th August the International Day Against Nuclear Tests through the unanimous adoption of its resolution 64 by 35. The preamble of the resolution emphasizes that every effort should be made to end nuclear tests in order to avoid devastating and harmful effects on the lives and health of the people, and that the end of the nuclear test is one of the key means of achieving the global goal of nuclear weapons free world. The main mechanism for eradicating nuclear weapons testing as the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, it was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on 10 September 1996. To date, 187 countries have signed the treaty and 178 have ratified it. For the treaty to enter into force, it must be ratified by those states with significant nuclear capabilities. While the general consensus within the international community is that nuclear weapons tests pose threatening risk, there are still exists to some degree a lingering suspicion of the possibility of clandestine nuclear weapon testing. There is also a concern that if nuclear weapons cannot be tested for their reliability, may be in jeopardy. However, over the years, advances in science and technology have exponentially boosted the capacity to monitor and verify compliance mechanisms and nuclear weapons proliferation detection. These activities and tracking tools have been initiated and developed by the Provisional Technical Secretariat of CTBT organization, in short known as CTBTO. Preparatory Commission, despite the stalled entry into force and increasingly robust public advocacy, including activities and events undertaken on the International Day Against Nuclear Tests, is exerting pressure on the powers that to be moved forward on the ratification of the treaty with a view towards the ultimate eradication of nuclear weapons testing. So the Preparatory Commission for the CTBTO and its 178 ratifying state vigorously continue to push for the treaty's entry into force. The CTBTO's international monitoring system will include 337 monitoring facilities around the world when complete. The system is more than 90% complete with 306 certified stations transmitting data around the clock of CTBTO headquarters in Vienna, ensuring that no nuclear explosion will escape detection. However, nothing can play as crucial a role in avoiding a nuclear war or nuclear terrorist threat as the total elimination of nuclear weapons. Bringing an irreversible end to nuclear explosion will prevent the further development of nuclear weapons. Since the International Day Against Nuclear Tests was first declared, there have been a number of significant development discussions and initiatives relevant to its goals, the objectives, as well as conferences convened to elaborate and advance these developments. On July 22nd July to 2nd August, the second session of the Preparatory Committee for the 2026 Review Conference of the Parties of the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons was held in Geneva in 2024, which was the latest one. So the role of civil society from the beginning of the nuclear age, civil society has played a prominent role in the effort to permanently halt testing of nuclear weapons. Physicists, seismologists, and other scientists, physicians and lawyers, women's organizations, research institutions and disarmament NGOs, mayors and parliamentarians, downwinders exposed to radioactive contaminants resulting from atmospheric testing, and Hibakusha, and survivors of atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the wider public, and all have been involved. So some highlights from the decades of activities. In the 1950s, physicians and women's group raised awareness of the health effects of atmospheric testing, including the presence of radioisotopes in children's teeth. The campaign helped lead to the Partial Test Ban Treaty, which prohibits testing underwater, in the atmosphere and outer space, but not underground. In the 1980s, US and Russian scientists conducted joint experiments to demonstrate feasibility of verifying ban on underground testing. Also in 1980s, US groups conducted the mass protest of the Nevada test site in the US and a powerful anti-testing campaign known as the Nevada Semipalatinsk movement emerged in Kazakhstan, home to the principal Soviet test site. At Semipalatinsk, well-publicized actions and campaigns were also directed at the French test site of Mururoa in the Pacific in the 1980s and again in the 1990s. So beginning in 1985, NGOs lobbied in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty (NPT) review process for a commitment to achieve a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty, CTBT. It was first adopted in the connection with the 1995 decision to extend the treaty and reaffirm at the 2000 and 2010 review conferences, especially since the end of the Cold War. Civil society has vigorously advocated in growing numbers for NPT review conference to commit to steps leading to elimination of nuclear weapons including the CTBT and the 2000 and 2010 conferences, in fact, have done so. In the 1990s, NGOs and parliamentarians sparked the covering of a 1991 conference on amending the Partial Test Ban Treaty to make it comprehensive, a process which helped to lay the groundwork for CTBT negotiations. Non-governmental researchers developed understanding of the verification techniques. Non-governmental research and advocacy groups monitored the negotiations that led to the 1996 adoption of the CTBT. NGOs campaigned to persuade their governments to negotiate that then ratify the CTBT. Some also criticized experimental and supercomputing facilities intended to replace nuclear explosive testing. Over the decades, and especially in recent years, civil society efforts in support of the comprehensive ban on nuclear testing for the most part have been connected to the large enterprise of achieving the total elimination of nuclear weapons. To help bring in CTBT into force, NGOs, civil society, and members of the public, especially in those countries that must ratify the treaty for it to enter into force, can urge their and other governments and parliaments to sign and ratify the treaty. They can also urge their governments to endorse the Secretary General's 5-point proposal for nuclear disarmament, which includes bringing the CTBT into force and consideration of negotiating a nuclear weapons convention backed by a strong system of verification, has long been proposed at the United Nations. Many entities such as research institutes, academic institutions, and NGOs are engaged in disarmament-related work, including in relation to the CTBT. When we look at the history, ending nuclear testing began early on the morning of 16 July 1945 at a deserted test site in Alarcón, New Mexico, when the United States exploded its first atomic bomb. In the 5 decades between the fateful day in 1945, the opening of the signature of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, in 1996, over 2,000 nuclear tests were carried all over the world. The United States conducted 1,032 tests between 1945 and 1992. The Soviet Union carried out 715 tests between 1949 and 1990. The United Kingdom carried out 45 tests between 1952 and 1991. France carried out 210 tests between 1960 and 1996. China carried out 45 tests between 1964 and 1996. India carried out 1 test in 1970. Since the CTBT was opened for signatures in September 1996, 10 nuclear tests have been conducted. India conducted 2 tests in 1998. Pakistan conducted 2 tests in 1998. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea conducted nuclear tests in 2006, 2009, 2013, 2016, and 2017. So there are different types of nuclear tests. Nuclear explosions have been detonated in all environments, above ground, underground, and underwater. Bombs have been detonated on top of towers, on board voyages, suspended from balloons, on the Earth's surface, underwater, in depth of 600 meters, underground to the depths of more than 2,400 meters, and in horizontal tunnels. Test bombs have been dropped by aircraft and fired by rockets up to 200 miles into the atmosphere. So atmospheric testing refers to the explosions which take place in or above the atmosphere. All told, of the over 2,000 nuclear explosions detonated worldwide between 1945 and 1996, 25% of over 500 bombs were exploded in the atmosphere, over 200 by the United States, over 200 by the Soviet Union, about 20 by Britain, and about 50 by France and over China. over 20 by China. International concern over radioactive fallout resulting from atmospheric test escalated in the mid-1950s. In March 1954, the United States, tested its hydrogen bomb Castle Bravo in the Pacific's Marshall Islands. The Bravo test created the worst radiological disaster in the United States testing history. By accident, local civilians on the Marshall Islands, US servicemen stationed on the Rogerich Atoll, and the Japanese fishing trawler Lucky Dragon were contaminated with the fallout. Nuclear weapon tests have been carried out in all environments above ground, underground, and underwater. Atmospheric testing was banned. So underwater So since then, atmospheric testing was banned. So atmospheric testing was banned by the 1963 Partial Test Ban Treaty. Negotiation had largely responded to the international community grave concern over the radioactive fallout resulting from atmospheric tests. So the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom became parties of the treaty. France and China did not. France conducted its last atmospheric test in 1974, China in 1980. So underwater testing refers to the explosions which take underwater or close to the surface of the water. Relatively, few underwater tests have been conducted. The first underwater test, Operational Crossroads, was conducted by the United States in 1946 at its Pacific Proving Grounds in the Marshall Islands with the purpose of evaluating the effects of nuclear weapons used against naval vessels. Later, in 1955, the United States Operation Big Man conducted a single underwater nuclear test at a depth of 600 meters to determine the vulnerability of submarines to nuclear explosions. Underwater nuclear explosions close to the surface can disperse large amounts of radioactive water and steam containing nearby ships, structures, and individuals. Underwater nuclear testing was banned by the 1963 Partial Test Ban Treaty. Of the over 2,000 nuclear explosions detonated worldwide between 1945 and 1996, 25% of over 500 bombs were exploded in the atmosphere. So underground testing means that nuclear explosion Underground testing means that nuclear explosions are detonated at varying depths on the surface of the Earth. These comprise the majority, about 75% of all nuclear explosions detonated during the Cold War 1945 to 1989. That is over 800 of all tests conducted by the United States and nearly 500 of all tests conducted by the Soviet Union. When the explosion is fully contained, underground nuclear testing emits negligible fallout compared to atmospheric testing. However, if underground nuclear tests went to the surface, they can produce considerable radioactive debris. Underground testing is usually evident through seismic activity related to the yield of the nuclear device. Underground nuclear testing was banned by the 1996 Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, that bans all nuclear explosions on Earth. 75% of all nuclear test explosions during the Cold War were conducted underground. Today, we are also commemorating few other commemorations. Today is also commemorated as International Bat Night Day on August 30 and 31st. So that is last full weekend of the August every year. So this year it is observed both on 30 and 31st, that is Saturday and Sunday, which is observed in United States of America and Europe mainly. However, 30 countries have come together to spread awareness on the bats of their habitat and the bust some more myths. Several nature conservation agencies and NGOs, especially in Europe, work towards imparting knowledge to the public on the lifestyle and habits of bats via different mediums such as presentations, exhibitions, and bat walks. So International Bat Night is observed by around 30 countries to bring to the light need for preserving this nocturnal species. International Bat Night started in 1997 as a way to inform the public about the needs and benefits of bats in the nature. This annual observance helps to promote the good image of the bats and busting some myths and providing clarity on them. It is imperative that we know more about bats as there are over 1400 species of bats across the world. Bats are second largest order of mammals. They're rodents and make up around 20% of all classified mammals species in the world. These creatures can be found on nearly every part of the planet apart from extreme deserts and polar regions. Humans are often afraid of bats due to general misconception that they are harmful. While they do have potential to spread rabies, not all bats are out there to attack you. Bats do feed on blood, but mostly they feed on insects, and it's a good thing as it helps to keep the insect population in check and maintains a balance in nature. Bats are even popular in pop culture. Some portray them as dark and scary, while others portray them as fun creatures. The most popular and favored representation of bats that remain significant is the superhero Batman and the comics that movies based on the character that has helped to put bats in a positive light to a certain extent in the minds of many. There are so many species of bats and so much to know about them. You can spend International Bat Night reading about these flying mammals, watching documentaries, and then sharing the knowledge you gain with others and attending events like this, online and offline. Today is also commemorated as Franchisee Appreciation Day in US every year, which is celebrated on the Saturday before Labor Day and takes place on August 30. This day is observed to create awareness among consumers that local franchises and how they can support them Entrepreneurs and small business owners also learn about harnessing the power of franchising for business growth. The franchising model is considered to the greatest business model ever. It is a win-win for both business and consumers. People all over the world have kick-started their business via franchising. As strange as it sounds, franchising dates back to the Middle Ages. Franchising essentially groups business together under a single banner to make resources and production of final goods cheaper and to promote sales. There is common misconception that franchises means a lot of money, which is not always true. Franchises enable small business to set up their own ventures with all the resources they need and the stability of an established brand. National Franchise Appreciation Day encourages consumers to buy more products from franchisee-backed business and aims to bring synergy between smaller businesses. Today is also commemorated as Frankenstein Day on August 30 in UK and US, as we are celebrating all the details surrounding this classic novel. It has been over 200 years since the original Frankenstein story was published. That's 2 centuries since a young scientist named Victor Frankenstein breathed life into his very own creature, the monster, and led to countless Halloweens of young children covered in green paint with box-shaped foreheads. Today is also commemorated as International Cabernet Sauvignon Day on August 30. So today is also commemorated as International Whale Shark Day on August 30. Celebrates whale sharks and their epicness. The humognus fish happens to be the largest shark species on the planet. Growing as much as 60 feet from the time of its birth, the whale shark is known for its slow and gentle behavior. It usually prefers to swim in shallow depths, but it is also found in waters as deep as 3,000 feet. Due to such factors, whale sharks are extremely easy to fish. People have been using them for their meat and fins. The whale shark market has led to at least a 50% decrease in the fish population. This is an alarming situation, and the giant has now been placed on the endangered species list. The declining numbers also mean that the general marine environment is in danger too, due to threat of large numbers of plankton, which are one of the primary food sources for the whale sharks. The International Whale Shark Day was first commemorated in 2008 at the International Whale Shark Conference in Isla Holbox. The conference hosted 40 ocean experts, activists, and scientists who had a concern for the whale shark's declining population. While said sharks have been around for more than 240 to 260 million years, so despite their enormous size and the fact that their smaller cousins can prove to be more hostile, the whale sharks are known to have gentle demeanors. At birth, they are no bigger than 16 to 24 inches, but as they continue to grow, reaching their peak at 25, they can be as long as 46 to 60 feet. They have 300 rows of 3,000 teeth, which are only 0.2 inches long, weighing in at some 12 tons. Whale sharks are filter feeders, mostly consuming plankton, squids, and fish. Like their size, they also tend to have enormous appetites that can lead them to eat 44 heaps of food every day. The beautiful giant creatures, who also have unique patterns of dots and lines on their skin, are hard to locate. They have been around since the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, but it is reported that before the 1980s, there were less than 350 sightings recorded. This fact comes after more than 100 years since the whale shark discovery by scientific community. These sharks swim in warm waters that are not too deep. Every spring, that whale sharks migrate to the western continental shelf of Australia. The coral in the area's Ningaloo Reef provides the fish with an ample amount of plankton. However, in recent decades, the whale shark has been placed on the endangered list of world species. They are continuously hunted for meat, fins, and just pure fun. Parts of Asia, like Philippines, continue the whale shark trade. If the whale sharks are not saved, it will affect our oceans too. Too many planktons will promote algal growth, and that in turn will lead to negative impacts on other fish species, the environments, and humans. One of the biggest enemies of the whale sharks or any marine creature, for that matter, is plastic pollution. If a whale shark ingests plastic and it reaches its intestines, then the poor fish is as good as dead. The plastic will make it sick, not allowing to eat anything else. So, for the sake of whale sharks, reduce or eliminate your plastic usage. Sharks are interesting sea creatures, and their species, whale sharks, are quite amazing fish to learn about, unlike their smaller cousins. Whale sharks are slower, gentler, unique in all that they do. They generally docile creatures are also known for carrying human beings on their backs and taking them for a ride. Whale shark merchandise, eat, drink, whale shark themed food, and change your social media display pictures to a whale shark. All these celebratory methods will help spread awareness about the endangered species. So even though they have the word whale in their names, the only reason they are known as whale sharks is because of their gigantic size. Whale sharks do not have sharp and long teeth, and this is why it is possible for them to swallow their food, shrimps, fish, plankton, whole. Whale sharks can live up to 150 years provided they survive to that age, as more than 90% of the whale sharks are killed before they reach the 150-year mark. Whale sharks are slow swimmers, and the highest speed they can reach is 3.1 miles per hour. Unlike whales, whale sharks do not stay with their younglings after giving birth. Whale sharks are some of the gentlest creatures in the nature out there. From their swimming and feeding habits to their beautiful patterns, whale sharks truly epitomize the phrase gentle giants, and this is one shark that we would mind swimming with. Our planet has gone through several extinction events, and during these times, it has also witnessed the birth and evolution of countless beings. Whale sharks are just one such creature. We can learn a lot about the planet's history if we take deep dive into the evolution of the whale sharks. Like many other living beings on Earth, whale sharks contribute their share in order to keep the globe going around. Without whale sharks, our oceans would swell with plankton populations. This would lead to algae growth that is extremely harmful to all sea creatures. Human beings will also be impacted by this in both the short and long runs. Today is also commemorated as National Beach Day on August 30 in US. Celebrate your affinity for the coast on August 30. Started in 2014, this day raises awareness of the beauty of beaches while also calling attention to keeping them clean and safe. After enjoying the beach, leave nothing behind. Keep animals from getting trapped or tangled in trash on land or in water. So swim, dive, surf, and take the world's aquatic playgrounds. Just remember to do your part to protect one of our most cherished natural resources, our beaches. Today is also commemorated as National Holistic Pet Day in US on August 30. When it comes to well-being of our pets, any kind of movement is game. Even Fetch on August 30, we can share valuable insights to help our pets have more fulfilling lives on National Holistic Pet Day. A holistic approach to well-being is nothing new for humans, but applying the lifestyle to household pets is still growing a trend. It starts with the basics of good nutrition, lots of physical exercise, and even mental stimulation. Animals need to be mentally active and challenged for the listless and boredom. Take some time to learn about caring for your pet with the same generosity you give your own mind, body, and spirit. So, if you aren't familiar with the holistic health care or haven't experimented with it for yourself, it will surely be difficult to employ it on your pet. Take the day to read up on how it could change your own life, and you will be much stronger advocate for holistic pet care. Sometimes taking matters into your own hands is the best approach by making your own dog food. You know exactly what's going on inside and nourishing your pet. However, be sure to research pet nutrition. Dogs, for example, make their own vitamin C, so you need not include ingredients high in this antioxidant. Imagine if you rarely left the confines of your home and office. You would go a little still crazy. If you are a dog owner, head to a new park or field to experience foreign subtle scents and sounds. Buy your cat some holistic toys for better stimulation. Holistic pet care places a large focus on preventive care. You can give your pets a long, healthy life by improving their daily upkeep and routines today so you can keep them disease free down the road. Find a veterinarian who emphasizes holistic preventive treatment methods. While there's nothing in the world we wouldn't do for our pets, needlessly running back and forth to the vet is costly. Integrate bonding time with your pet, feeding them for cancerous lumps or checking out their teeth and breath. Don't forget those healthy walks and lazy nights on the couch. Let's face it, pet food is expensive, especially treats on the National Holistic Pet Day. Consider what kind of treats you are giving your pets during training or just because. Make sure your pet treats aren't fatty or laced with unhealthy ingredients and additives. Today is also commemorated as National Grief Awareness Day in US. On August 30 is dedicated to raising awareness of the myriad ways in which individuals cope with loss. It offers resources to those going through personal losses and reminds us to support people we know who are grieving. National Grief Awareness Day, founded by Angli Cartwright in 2014, hopes to encourage open communication on loss and bereavement and better inform the public on the facts of grief. Grief is one of the oldest and most enduring aspects of the human experience. If you haven't yet experienced grief, it's unfortunately likely to happen. The term grief encompasses all of the emotions around a loss, and mourning is defined as external expression of pain. Bereavement is another commonly used term for grief. Throughout human history, there have been attempts to describe the heal grief, and they have changed significantly over the years. Due in part of our vastly improved physical and mental health care, grief is understood far differently today than even as little as 100 years ago. While we often have the privilege, for some even expectation of only losing our loved ones when they are at a ripe old age, comfortable and with family nearby. This has rarely been the case throughout history. The lack of modern transportation often separated loved ones, wars ravaged populations, and poor medical and sanitation knowledge led to too many untimely deaths. Throughout history, the death of loved ones have been far more common, and grief was understood differently. So, burials, often in family groupings, occur throughout the world. In many cultures, family and friends attend funerals or certain types of wakes to honor the deceased. Though mourning traditions vary from culture to culture, these aspects of ritual often persist. In part due to frequency of death and grief, the topic was poorly researched or treated until 1900s. In 1917, famous psychologist Sigmund Freud wrote, "Grieving is a natural process that should not be tampered with." This encapsulates the sentiment well. Grieving is part of life and uh, needs no special attention. As the century wore on, however, there came to be more interest in grief and its stages. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross famously wrote the consequential book on death and dying in 1969. The book laid out the 5 stages of grief that many are familiar with today under the name the Kubler-Ross method. This was easily accepted and grief was managed along a distinct timeline for years. Simon Simpson Rubin put forth the two-track model of bereavement to further explain this phenomenon in 1981. However, it was only from 1996 to 2006 that great headway was made in the understanding of grief as something that resisted strict and chronological definition. In the 2000s, a more fluid understanding of grief, especially as multifaceted and complex issue, has come to understand and treat it. Today is also commemorated as Popular Consultation Day in East Timor on August 30, which is annually observed on the same day by the people of Fast East Timor. The day commemorates the referendum that took place in 1999 that was conducted in the presence of the UN to let the people of East Timor choose between greater autonomy in Indonesia or separation from Indonesia to form a separate nation. The people chose separation by an overwhelming margin, and violence and conflicts erupted shortly after. But a new nation was born as per the aspirations of its citizens. Let's join their celebration. Today is also commemorated as Turkey Victory Day in Cuba. Turkish Armed Forces. Turkey Victory Day is an annually celebrated in Turkey on August 30, also known as Turkish Armed Forces Day, commemorates the Turkish victory over the Greeks in the 1992 Battle of Dumlupınar. After the First World War in 1918, the victorious Allied powers divided the destroyed Ottoman Empire. As a result, when the Treaty of Service were inscribed on August 10, 1920, the Triple Entente gave Greece ownership of some territories in Turkey. These regions included Western Anatolia, Imbros, now Gokseda, Tenedos, and Eastern Thrace. Simra, the national Turks, consequently rejected this incursion. So with this, we shall end today's commemorations. Thank you everyone for joining us in today's commemorations. In coming days, we'll be having a series of events on financial awareness. Soon we'll be launching the flyers, which will be conducted on 5th, 10th, and 15th and 20th. 4 sessions are planned related to financial literacy and financial awareness. So we request everyone to register for all the events. All the events, individual certificates are given directly. We are doing it with collaboration with the Mutual Funds Association of India. So you'll get directly an email. After completing the event, you'll be getting the certificate. So the registration links for the 4 events in September will be shared with you shortly. So we request everyone to register and also share. It's free. And free certificates are also provided for all the participants. So do share. And now I request everyone to quickly fill up the feedback form, which has been shared in the form of polls before leaving the platform. So see you all tomorrow at the same time with the same joining link with different commemorations. Take care. Good night.